Continue. So culture is adoptive and we can adopt from the cultures that we are associated. And culture has a distinct entity and culture has its utility, and culture is gratifying. Having said that, so what happened? It's not moving. Yeah. So what makes up a culture? Is how the culture comes up. So sociologists see culture as consisting of two different categories: material culture, related to any physical object to which we give social meaning, and symbolic culture, the ideas associated with the cultural group. Two different types. One is a material culture and then a symbolic culture. Particularly material culture includes the objects associated with a cultural group, such as tools, machines, utensils, buildings, and artwork. You know, even the utensils that we use help the individuals to understand our culture. These archaeologists, when they start digging here and there, they find some utensils of the ancient days. Through those utensils, they try to understand the culture of that period. So all of these are essential: material culture and then symbolic culture. Symbolic culture includes ways of thinking. So the ways of thinking in as the amalgamation of these beliefs, values, and assumptions, and ways of behaving, norms, interactions, and communication. You know, different cultures, we find different ways of communicating, particularly in Indian culture. No communication, mostly we have a non-verbal communication. So when somebody comes and asks, do you want a cup of coffee? I said, yes. We don't speak much. Yes, we use like this. Means yes. And we call them this, come. A lot of gestures we use and postures we use to communicate. But every culture will have their own way of communicating. These gestures and postures in other cultures may have a different meaning. So in a Western culture, these ways of, if you say, when they ask, do you need a cup of coffee? If you don't talk, if you say like this, they don't understand, because that's not the way that they communicate. So the symbolic culture, you know, we have all this. So the meaning of this red light depends on the context. No, you don't need to have a big board or anything. So the meaning of this red light have a different ways of understanding. If it is at the four corners a red light, you understand that culture communicates. Yes, you need to stop your vehicle. And if you have a different type of red light there, you know, you understand it's a place for red lights, prostitutes area, and police having a red light. So it's a way of culture. The color gives a different meaning in different contexts, different places. So components of culture. One of the most important functions of symbolic culture is it allows us to communicate through signs, gestures, and language. As I already said, signs, You know, even the children in the school, if they say like this, they are communicating something to teacher. If they say this, they communicate something. And different ways of communicating, this non-verbal communication, signs, gestures. And my son, little boy, 6 years old boy, if he is angry, he will go to some corner, stiffly sits like that. He sits like this. Then he communicating. His gesture help us to understand that he is communicating something. Even the language. These are all cultural ways of doing it. If I am happy with an individual, we just politely call, hello. If I am angry, hello. The ways that we communicate, signs or symbols such as traffic signals, as I said, a product logo. Even a small logo communicates so much. Even my coach institute has its own logo on it. It communicates so much. It's a part of the culture, or used to meaningfully represent something else. Gestures are the signs that we make with our body, such as head gestures. We say like this, no, 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 yes, yes, no. We have different ways of these are all cultural ways of communication. Western culture, they don't have gestures with the head, no. They never knew. They say yes or no, verbally. But we say no means yes means like this. So we have the gestures or the signs that we make with our body, such as hand gestures and facial expressions. It is important that these gestures also carry meaning. Components of culture, as we continue to see. Finally, language, a system of communication using vocal sounds, gestures, and written symbols, is probably the most significant component of culture, because it allows us to communicate. Now, the language allows us to communicate, because language is one of the important component in culture, because language has a great significant impact on culture. Language is so important that many have argued that it shapes not only our communication, but our perceptions of how we see things as we will. Recently, last week, the central government of India brought a new educational policy, saying that all the children till 5th grade, they have to learn in vernacular language. Because in vernacular language, obviously children thinking level will be high. Because the mother tongue plays a vital role. Some of the countries like Korea and Japan, they still give a lot of priority to the mother tongue. By the way, the theology has been really developed by German theologians. Even now, if you need to study any theology, the Bultmann or whatever, not all the theological textbooks are written in Germany. Now we have to learn German. German theologians play a vital role. They haven't written in English. They wrote only in Germany. But still, now we have to learn Germany to be a good theologian and understand the background and the context of the theological concepts. So language is so important that many have argued that it shapes not only our communication, but our perceptions of how we see things as well. So language is very, very essential. And the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is the idea that language structures thought, and that ways of looking at the world are embedded in language, supports this premises. So snow, jam, family guy, and all these some sort of terminologies that we use. How do we understand unless we taste, unless we see? So these are all the components in the language we explain. This is snow, yeah. How do you understand this is snow? It is a language that says, yeah, when you see this, we have given a code saying that this is a snow, then only the child fix it in the mind. We say this bottle is a jam, this is a guy. These are a language plays a vital role to this cognitive mind to understand the objects. The mind fixes, this is money. So the language plays a vital role in culture. So importance of language. Language facilitates culture. Language is the key component in culture. Language facilitates culture. Is American English the same and British English code? No, not at all. It says C-O-L-O-U-R, the British English. American English says you remove the U, C-O-L-O-R. Sometimes we really struggle, even in pronunciation. So the language plays a vital role in culture. Where would you find eggplant in the grocery store? Eggplant. So cheese plus hamburger, cheese hamburger. Lettuce plus hamburger, lettuce burger. So these are all a kind of Western cultural context. We may not know all that much, some of us. Of course, we know now because of so much influence from the West. We know all this cheese, hamburger, and all those things. So values, shared beliefs about what a group considers worthwhile are desirable, guide the creation of norms, the formal and informal rules regarding what kinds of behavior are acceptable and appropriate within a culture. Norms given our behavior. Even in our Indian cultural context, we have norms. We have a bit behavior patterns. So norms are specific to a culture, time period, and situation. Norms can be either formal, such as a law, a common type of formally defined norm that provides an explicit statement about what is permissible and what is illegal in a society. I worked in a school, a seminary, as a director, and this old man, still very funny. The Northeast girls, they never knew what is sari. Particularly Northeast girls, they wear only different types of dresses. They never knew how to wear sari. But in this Bible school, sari is compulsory. These children, they struggle to understand how to wear, and even they wear the saris and come to class and they go, we see the struggle, the fear and the anxiety when they walk. But the kind of norm, a law in the college saying everybody should wear a sari, but inside a lot of filth and a lot of sexual perversion, but outside they want only sari. And another norm, nobody should wear zin pant. It's very funny to see. There's a norm and the law outside. These are all a kind of external, the culture sometimes imposes all these external things. The Christian culture, you need to sit only this way, you need to wear this dress, you need to speak only this. And even the Hindu culture, or maybe in a society, every society will have their own norms. Are the rules for playing soccer are informal, which are not written down and are unspoken. So unspoken norms are there in our society. And particularly now we have so many of these norms and unspoken rules and regulations. As I say, if you eat this banana, this will happen. So people, such a funny norms are there. You should not eat ghee. If you will get a cough, which is not really true. And don't take a curd, you will get a cold. These are all such kind of funny norms, and the laws have come in a hidden form. So types of norms can also be distinguished by the strictness with which they are enforced. The strictness that is enforced, and even we see them in the family, in a society, in the church, in the temple, or in an office. Hidden norms. And here, particularly in an Indian context, we have these hidden norms. Of course, even now, some traditional families, they do practice. If the father-in-law is there, daughter-in-law should not walk in front of that place, or maybe should not come when a guest comes. The wife should not come to the drawing hall, or maybe give, there's so many hidden norms. A folkway is a loosely enforced norm that involves common customs, practices, or procedures that ensure smooth social interaction and acceptance. Some of these folk way of these norms are very good. The society runs with that. Society rules and regulations. I think I am posting a book on an understanding folk religion, written by, what is his name? I'll tell you when I remember. Um, I'm just not getting this name. I'm posting that book. You should read that. So a more ray is a norm that carries greater moral significance, is closely related to the core values of a group, and often involves severe this repercussion for violators. A taboo is a norm ingrained so deeply that even thinking about violating is evokes strong feelings of disgust, horror, or revulsion for most people. In any culture, we see these taboos. These taboos we need to understand to get into that culture, particularly in a tribal culture and in some folk cultural context. We have these taboos. What are those? Even in a Hindu cultural context, we have so many taboos. They are associated with the superstitious beliefs and practices. Sanctions are positive or negative reactions to the ways that people follow or disobey norms, including rewards for conformity and punishment for norm violators. When these people violate these norms, they get punishments. Sanctions help to establish social control. The formal and informal mechanisms used to increase conformity to values and norms, and thus increase social cohesion. So as we continue to understand the culture, as we look at the culture, sociologists who study culture often focus on their own cultures. Some sociologists, however, engage in the process of othering by studying unusual, extraordinary, or deviant cultural groups. So these are all sociological perspectives. As we look at these technical words, we need to understand ways of looking at the culture. We have been trying to understand what is culture, the norm, the taboos, and all those things, different types of cultures. But now we get into the ways of looking at the culture. You and I, how we look at, number one, ethnocentrism. You need to Google and read more on this. Some of the books that I'm giving, they explain more on ethnocentrism. Either any one of us, we fall into any one of these ways of looking at the culture. Mostly, the Western Christianity falls into this ethnocentrism. What is ethnocentrism? It is the principle of using one's own culture as a standard by which to evaluate another group or individual, leading to the view that cultures other than one's own are abnormal. Cultures other than one's own are abnormal. Hope you got my point. Cultures other than my church are abnormal. Sometimes I feel my brother Buxing church culture is the perfect culture. Others are abnormal. No, they are not really, they don't know, they are cultureless. No, my Christian culture is the perfect because it has directly come from there, from the West. Mostly 80% of Christian culture has come from the West. The perfect. And what is there in Indian culture is demonic. Everything is demonic. Let's throw out everything. So even my caste culture, sometimes this is such a demonic possession is very much in India. The caste is directly from the demon. The caste culture, my caste, the forward caste or a backward caste or a Dalit caste, everybody is caste oriented. Even the Christians are more caste consciousness people. I thought before coming to Christianity, I don't know, before knowing Christ only as a Hindu boy, I hate caste consciousness because I have seen my relatives, family, everybody practicing it. I hated caste consciousness. But when I became a believer, I see more caste consciousness, even in Christianity. So my own caste, within the Dalit caste, there is a sub-caste. My own caste culture is greater than the other culture. Culture other than one's own is abnormal. Who wants a snake? Anyway, those are in a Western context. Cultural relativism. That is a cultural ethnocentrism, says that my culture is greater and yours all is demonic and maybe not at all up to the mark. And the second thing is cultural relativism. What is cultural relativism? Do you remember from the beginning I've been telling, any extreme is devilish. C.S. Lewis said, devil brings pairs, extremisms. This is another extreme. Cultural relativism is the principle of understanding other cultures on their own terms rather than judging according to one's own culture. It's not accepting every culture. All cultures are good. Yours is good, mine is good, everything is good. Particularly postmodern thinking is this, relativism. Everything is good. There is no absolute values. Everything is right. In your culture, sati is right. In my culture, this is right. And in your culture, bribing is right. Because today, in particular in Asian context, especially in India, bribing has come into a cultural context. It became a culture. Now, even Christian community, the Christian nominal Christians, and even some believers also, bribing is a part of their life. And particularly my mission leaders are most bribing people. They exercise bribing directly or indirectly. Call me privately, I will talk to you if you really need examples. When studying any group, it is important to try to employ cultural relativism because it helps sociologists to see others more objectively. In one point, this is good. In one way, cultural relativism is good, but if you go deep, if you really open all the doors for this, you lose the exclusiveness of biblical culture. It leads to a kind of syncretistic practices. So when studying a group, particularly, you are going to a Hindu group, initially to study, yes, we need to have this relative understanding, cultural relativism. It is important to try to employ cultural relativism because it helps sociologists to see others more objectively, but there is a danger in it. And now, varieties in culture, as we continue to see, although much research focuses on the differences between cultures, there is also tremendous variation within a culture. Multiculturalism. We have seen ethnocentrism, cultural relativism, and now we see multiculturalism. Values diverse racial, ethnic, national, and linguistic backgrounds, and so encourages the reaction of cultural differences within society rather than assimilation. We are closing. The dominant culture refers to the values, norms, and practices of the group within society that is most powerful in terms of wealth, prestige, status, and influence. A subculture is a group within society that is differentiated by its distinctive values, norms, and lifestyle. Dominant culture, subculture, and then counterculture. A counterculture is a group within society that openly rejects and or actively opposes society's values and norms. This is a counterculture. We're going to study all of them from the biblical perspective. Mainstream culture is often characterized by points of dissension and division, which are sometimes called culture wars. You know, you have seen nations after nations having wars, but there is a cultural wars that happened in the history, and now it's happening in India also. Culture wars. Sociologists also make a distinction between norms and values are more aspire to idle culture than actually practiced real culture. Idle culture, real culture. You may be hearing so many technical words. Don't worry about it. You keep on read, you'll understand. High culture is distinguished from low culture based on the characteristics of their audience, not on characteristics of their cultural objects. Now here, culture needs an audience to listen to their way of perceptions, and their way of uh, explaining the terms. High culture refers to those forms of culture usually associated with the elite or dominant classes. Even in Indian culture, Indian context, we see the forward caste, high caste community, the country as a nation, as a people, think, oh, that's a the high culture, great culture. Those who are in the hierarchy, the affluent society. Why Western culture is so prominent across the globe? Because of the high culture, the high class, superpower. And why a kind of a Brahmanical culture in India is looked at as a superior? Because of the status. Here, status, socio-political, economic status decides what is high culture and low culture. Why the poor tribal or a Dalit culture is very low, inferior. Of course, they are in the mud. They play with the animals, and they live with the animals. But sometimes that's the rich culture. Having not having a upper cloth, that's their culture. That is the rich for them. That's a high culture for them. But we look at them as a low culture. But even the high class, the affluent society can have a sleeveless and law, even a kind of half naked. That's a high culture. Today, the Western culture has imported all these kind of things. But that is a high profile culture. But the poor guys who don't have money to buy clothes, and then all the time living in the forest, and here and there struggling with the minimum clothes they wear. Of course, they are also wearing the same color dress. But this is looked as a low culture. Here, a culture is manipulated. People manipulate the culture. It depends on the high class. Popular culture refers to the forms of cultural expression usually associated with the masses, consumer good, and consumer products. You see the most of the advertisements, they give this popular culture. The consumerism, consumer culture. A dil mange more. This heart wants more and more. Today we have this culture, consumer culture. And the culture change. Tomorrow we talk about this culture change. Cultures usually change slowly and incrementally. Though change can also happen in rapid and dynamic ways, but slowly it brings change. One of the key ways that material culture can change is through technology. Through technology. And today, technology changed our culture. We have dress, we have eating, we have talking, we have respecting, we have family life, whatnot, everything. The technology is controlling our culture. So we stop it here today. And then tomorrow we pick up from here, cultural imperialism. We continue from here. Today, let me stop it here. And uh, we go for a discussion about 10 minutes, and then we can conclude today's lecture. Okay, any doubts or any concerns for us to pray and conclude?